Hi all you journaling lovers, and welcome to today's video. I have been getting some questions about the vintage paper I use in my journal. It's regular, inexpensive office paper that I use coffee or tea to age and give a vintage feel. The coffee removes the coating on the paper and adds a bit of color. I love using it in my journals and I love making it. It's a very slow, relaxing process that I am going to show you in today's video. You can use blank paper, but I like printing images or textures on the paper to give it an extra level of depth. All the images on the papers in today's video are from Pixabay, which is a site where you can download free high-resolution images for personal use. Just go there and do a search for scrapbook paper and you will find all the images I'm using. I use InDesign to mount one image onto every page and adjust the size, but you can also use a Word document. Then I lower the opacity of the image a bit, depending on how dark it is to start with, but on average I set the opacity to about 50%. Sometimes I also print poems or famous letters in a handwriting font, and in this case I printed a recipe for a sidecar cocktail as it's a big element in this particular novel. And for my Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda spread, I used some printout of their emails. I love incorporating little book details like that onto my spreads. First of all, we are going to make some coffee. I'm using a fair trade coffee from Lindvalls, which is a local company with its own factory in Uppsala, where I live. So, to turn this batch of boring office paper into some quality vintage paper, we are going to need a flat tray or pan large enough to fit the paper I'm using, about 2 pots of coffee, and a nice big spoon. I start by adding a little bit of coffee to the bottom of the tray, then I add a sheet of paper and make sure it's all covered by the liquid. Then I add another sheet of paper and repeat the process. Now that all the paper is in the tray covered with coffee, I am going to leave it to soak for a while. I'd say at least 20 minutes is good, but this particular batch sat for maybe an hour while we had dinner. Now it's time to get rid of the coffee. If you want to, you can pour it into a container and use for another batch. I'm putting a towel down on my kitchen counter and then separate each sheet of paper and lay them flat to dry. I don't have a lot of space, so I just add another towel on top of that layer and add another layer. This way the paper is going to dry slow but flat. If you're in a hurry, you can set your oven to a low temperature and dry it in there. about 24 hours later, all the paper has dried nicely. Now we have a nice big pile of vintage paper ready to use. But I like trimming off the edges because it makes the paper a bit easier to store. Also, I enjoy making a cup of tea, lighting a candle, putting on some show to watch, and trim away. I find it very soothing and meditative. The narrow edges I usually discard, but the bigger pieces I save and use in my journals as well. Here we are with the finished results. Lots and lots of beautiful, aged, vintage feel paper to use in my journals the coming months. In some you can clearly see an image or a pattern, and in others there's just a subtle hint of something there that adds an extra bit of color and texture. As I said, all the images I've used in this video can be found on Pixabay, and they are free to download for personal use. Now I am off to use some of this lovely paper in my next journal spread. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you will feel inspired to make your own paper. If you do, make sure to let me know in the comments how it goes. Thanks for watching and see you soon.